Today we have the debt-free nurse, and she talks about how she became that.
Although, plot twist, she is not fully debt-free, and she talks about that because she bought a house. So that's okay. We will allow that.
We allow. And we are not the debt-free nurses. We are the full of debt.
The debt-full nurses.
The indebted nurses.
Yes, forever lead.
Because we feel like we know what we are doing, and leverage is the key to success.
Yes. No, but she talks about how she kind of got into this platform of focusing on becoming debt-free and how it's essentially propelled her forward in her life, and different ways that she leverages other things like pay raises and kind of manipulating her schedule and the shift she works and all that kind of stuff to maximize her income. So a lot of cool little tips and tricks. And she's got a
course.
Stick around, find out. Welcome to the Investing RN podcast. Today we are joined by Allison Hall from North Carolina, but we're not going to say where. Somewhere in North Carolina. She is the debt-free nurse on Instagram, which is how we found her. And got a lot of good tips. I saw something about saving 48 or paying off 48K and saving 10K in 18 months. And that right away resonated with me. So welcome to the show. We're excited to have you. Tell us about nursing and how you got into it.
So I'll try to make this really short. I have a whole podcast on my whole nursing journey of the last 9 years. But I actually was a swimmer. I swam in college and I got a scholarship. I went to San Diego State, and my mom was a nurse. She was a single mom. So she raised me in Southern California on a nurse's salary. I have a brother and a sister. So all three of us, and she paid for everything we wanted to do on a single nurse's salary, which was fantastic and also crazy. I tell her all the time, I'm like, how did you do it? So went to college, and my major was pre-physical therapy. And I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist or a physician's assistant. And I was going into my last semester, and this is also a hilarious story. I was taking care of my friend who had thrown up. I was not drunk. She was drunk. And I was like, oh, I could do this. Like, this isn't that bad. Because I had always said I could never do what my mom did, because I was like, I don't like blood. I just don't do that stuff. So I was like, oh, well, if I can clean up throw up, I could probably be a nurse. And I had done the research on PA schools and PT schools, and a lot of the schools in Southern California are really expensive. They're about $50,000 a year, and you would only be making between 70 and 90K starting out as a physical therapist. So I was trying to be semi-smart, and I was like, well, I could probably make around that as a nurse, if not more, and my loans would be much cheaper. So my mom's like, well, you need to be a CNA first. So I went to CNA school, and I did that while I was in school. So I did it at night, and I loved it. I loved taking care of long-term care kids. I did you do a rotation, and I did it at a long-term care facility for kids, and I just fell in love with it. And I was like, I want to work with kids. So I had always taught swimming lessons. I had been a lifeguard growing up. I was a swim coach while I was in nursing school. And then I ended up being a CNA while I was in nursing school. And that's how I kind of decided to be a nurse. And I started out in PCU, and then I eventually ended up in ICU, ended up in cardiac ICU, was there for a little while, almost quit nursing. And then just because it was the bullying, and by the time I was in CVICU, I was just taking care of machines, and I was like, I don't think this is for me. There were really super unsafe ratios, and I just was like, I'm going to lose my license if I stay here.
This episode is sponsored by All Day Investments. If you would like to get your start in real estate investing, but don't want to deal with toilets or tenants, we have several new opportunities that might interest you. Head over to alldayinvestments.co/invest, or follow the link in our show notes to book a call with our team.
So then I went to PICU. I applied to NP school. I'm giving you guys a very short version of this. I could go on and on. So I had a huge transition, applied to NP school, got in, and then I'll leave out my financial journey during this time, which kind of plays a part into all this stuff. But started NP school, started in the PICU, loved the PICU, and then got through 2 years of NP school and was in the PICU for 2 years. And then I was married, and my ex-husband was like, I don't want to be married. I don't want to have kids, and kind of dropped that bomb on me in 2020, right after the pandemic started. So I was like, well, I don't know if I want to be an NP anymore. And had like 3 weeks of crying and debating on whether or not like what I wanted to do with my life, because I thought I was married. I thought I wanted to have kids. I was going to be an NP and like had this whole plan. And that all fell apart. And so I moved to a different part of North Carolina, and I started back in the PICU and did a little bit of travel nursing, and then ended up in the Peds Cath Lab. And then as of 2 weeks ago, started as a clinical instructor, and I do remote nursing as a remote triage nurse. So that's like kind of my short version of my nursing story. Rapid fire.
That's just so much information. Like, where do we go into all of that?
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. So I think one of the things that stuck out to me, well, first of all, I think it's interesting that you mentioned liking peds, working with peds and long-term care, because like personally, I mean, I love kids, but I don't like working with kids in the hospital so much. And then long-term care, like I was ER, so it's like I want them in and out. I don't want to get to know them, like all this stuff. So it's like, but I think that's the great thing about nursing. It's like there's so many, and now you're in like clinical or what is it, clinical triage or phone triage? What'd you call it?
Yeah, phone triage. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like there's just so many different things you can do within it, and like we're always trying to be careful to not portray the wrong message with this podcast. Like while we're trying to teach people about like financial freedom and investing outside of nursing, it's like it's never our intention to drive people out of it. It's just like there's so many different things you can do. If one thing's not working, it doesn't mean nursing's not for you. There's so many different things you can try. But also,
but at the same time, if you want out, we're going to help with that too.
We're here for everyone. Yeah. but I was going to say the other thing you mentioned was the bullying. So can you talk? Are you okay talking about that a little more without saying where? Can you say what state it was in? Is that?
Oh, well, I've only worked in North Carolina. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because you mentioned the ratios too. So I was kind of wondering what state and what those ratios are like.
So it was just, so in the CVICU, it was just, we were getting paired with like one-on-one patients, and it was just because we were short staffed, and I just felt like I couldn't adequately take care of my patients. And at that point I really wanted out, but I do want to talk about, so the bullying was one of the reasons why I almost got out of nursing. But one of the other reasons was because, and this can go into my financial story too, is when I moved to North Carolina, I grossly underestimated how much I was going to make. I started making $21 an hour as a new grad in 2015. And with my expenses and moving from California, there was no way I was going to be able to live off of $21 an hour. I had $46,000 of student loan debt and $15,000 of credit card debt. And within the first 6 months, I was working almost 5 shifts a week. So I picked up, like, I was doing 1.0, which is 4 shifts a week. And then I was picking up on top of that. And so by the first year, I was severely burnt out because I had that same mindset that a lot of nurses do. That's like, oh, I'll just pick up an extra shift. And you're living outside of your means. And so that on top of bullying, I just was like, I don't think this profession is for me. And so going back to being a new grad and being burnt out, that's kind of what led me to learning about finances and starting to pay down my debt. Was I never wanted to be in that situation again where I had to pick up shifts. I was like, this cannot be my life. I don't want to work 4 and 5 shifts a week. Like, this is ridiculous. And so, and have nothing to show for it. So I had like no savings. I had so much debt. And I feel like I've worked with hundreds of nurses too, since I started coaching and teaching financial education. And there's just so many nurses that are in that same boat that have to pick up overtime or they have nothing. And so they don't have that freedom to be like, oh, I'll just take a different job.
Yeah, it did. I wanted to circle back just like that first intro part that you said. There's a lot of, most of our listeners are nurses, but we do have a few outsiders that listen.
Not on the end.
But there's a lot of things you said that only nurses will understand. Like we made a video recently just kind of poking fun at how many different bodily fluids are in your shoes all at the same time as a nurse. And I forget, you said a couple other things that only nurses will understand. But anyway, moving on. So I definitely fell into the trap. So it sounds like we had a similar story. However, I was living under my means, but then because of how easy it was to pick up that extra shift, I very quickly stopped and that became the new normal. What are you telling people to try to avoid that if they're currently in their means, but it's so easy to pick up the extra shifts? Like, oh, I want to go this, so I'm just going to do one extra shift.
I think it's a mindset thing too. So the problem with shift work is that we so readily have extra shifts that we are available to pick up. And so I think you have to have a plan for that money. So I think where a lot of people go wrong is they do the shift math, which is the most annoying thing to me ever. Is like, why do we think that's funny? Like this was years ago and I got actually bullied on Instagram for posting about this, but multiple people posted that stupid meme that was like, 1 shift this, 2 shifts this, 3 shifts equals this. And I was like, why do we think about money like this as nurses? Like, why don't we just think about like, we can think about it in shifts, sure, whatever. But 1 shift, pay your bills. Another shift, use it for savings. Another shift, use it for your investments. And so to me, I want nurses to use that overtime or extra shift to give them the freedom, like what you guys would say with investing is like, use that shift to, buy that house or invest in your 401k or invest in your Roth IRA instead of going on that trip or doing whatever. It's fine to spend money on those kind of things. But I think if you prioritize investing in yourself and investing in your future, then you have way more options. And so I think saying that a couple years ago was not the norm. And I just got hammered and was like, people were like, why are you judging us for what we're spending our money on? And I'm like, that's not my point. Like, that's not why I'm saying this. And so it was before pay transparency and before everyone started talking about money. And I just was like, I actually almost quit posting on social media because somebody had a Facebook group and they had a lot of followers that were basically just saying that like I was a terrible person and like saying that horrible things they were saying about me just because I took that meme that like multiple people had used. And I just said, why don't we think about it from a different perspective instead of what can I buy? What handbag could I buy? So I just feel like we need to change the narrative in nursing when it comes to like overtime and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think like, we were talking to somebody else and they were just saying like that they fell into that trap of like buying the bags and all these things. And it's like now, like maybe it's not a bag, maybe it's something else, a vacation or whatever. And it's like, and I think it's fine, but it's like, yeah, finding that balance. And what you were kind of trying to say is like, just look at it a little different. I mean, you could still have a good time, you can still enjoy it, but like be conscious of what you're doing. Like set some money aside, like don't put it all on that. And then you just fall into that trap of just trading your time for money and things, I guess.
Definitely. And it decreases the options that we have.
Options is where the freedom comes from. Like if you spend more, or even if you don't spend more than you're making, if you spend as much as you're making, you'll never be able to work your way out of the cycle, I guess.
So I think because I had that nest egg, and other people call it this too, but I like to call it an FU fund. And so having that FU fund that if you deal with bullying, if you don't like your job, you can quit in an instant and you are not stuck. And so I think that's more what I want for nurses and for our profession, is that we don't have to stay in that job that we hate. We don't have to stay in a job with those coworkers that are bullying us. We can quit and not have a backup plan and look for that dream job. Or if it's not a dream job, it's investing or, like leaving the profession altogether. You can do that if you set yourself up correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. So during that journey is when you got involved with finances or tracking your money and paying off debt. How did that kind of come to be?
I'll try to make this story. I'm like the queen of like very long stories, but so basically I started nursing in 2015. We kind of talked a little bit about how I was living outside of my means. I was making $21 an hour. I was working overtime and I had literally nothing to show for it. I didn't have anything in savings. I think I was saving a tiny bit in my Roth. I didn't even have like a Roth IRA. It was just the Roth at the hospital. And in 2016, I started getting really into like personal development and mindset. And then I was working so much overtime. I didn't have anything saved. All my credit cards were maxed out. And I remember sitting at a gas station the day before payday and I couldn't afford to pay for gas. So I put my debit card in and clicked credit because I knew it would come out the next day. And as I was sitting there, I'm like, what in the world am I doing? Like I work as a nurse, I'm working so much overtime and I literally can't afford anything. All my credit cards are maxed out. Like, what am I doing? I'm 27 years old. And so my mom had given me I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And I picked up the book. I opened a high interest savings account before they were now the biggest topic of every personal finance person. I remember I opened like a Capital One and it was like 1.5% or something in 2016. And like nobody else was talking about that. And I was like hopping from each one to whatever one had the best one. And I just remember the one takeaway from his book was you can afford anything, but you can't afford everything. And so that really stuck with me with the priorities. And that's kind of where my spending in alignment with your values came from and like how I started looking at my own values and what I really cared about and where I wanted my money to go. And so during this time, I also got really into Dave Ramsey. And so I paid off my $15,000 of credit card debt like pretty quickly. The only thing that I didn't really take from him was I was still going to the gym. I paid $120 because I was Olympic weightlifting at the time. And I still ate super healthy. I like cut out a lot of things. I wasn't eating beans and rice. And I think that's where like my spending in alignment with your values kind of came from. And I was like, I don't really agree with this. And around that same time, like the debt-free community was really big, but they were all faceless. And so they were posting on all their accounts and they were like, they wouldn't post their names and they wouldn't post their faces. And so I paid off $15,000 of credit card debt kind of the wrong way where I was like super aggressive. I like wouldn't go out with my friends, but like I was still at least doing like the things that I like to do with like fitness. So I took a little bit of a break after I paid that down, moved in with my ex-husband, started a new job, stopped working overtime. And then around that time, I was like, I really want to pay my student loans off, but I want to go about it a different way. And this was in 2017. And I was like, I don't want to do Dave Ramsey, but I like want to share what I'm doing. And so on my personal Instagram, you can go back on my account now and it's a highlight and it's literally every screenshot I made of every single payment I made to my student loans. And I'd like post some stupid GIF. And I was like so proud of myself because I was like, this is so fun. Like I'm just showing everyone. And like, no one was talking about money at the time. And like, I remember getting messages from friends and like random people who'd be like, what are you doing? Like, how are you paying all this debt off? And at that time I was working weekends. So I was working a weekends only job. I'm like the queen of like finding jobs that pay way more money than what they should. And then like basically strategically making more money in an area that doesn't pay very well. So I was doing weekends only, which made $10 extra an hour. So that was all going to like my regular bills. And then I would pick up a third shift during the week, which wasn't overtime. So I would just work 3 shifts basically. And that third shift was always like a bonus. So it was an extra $100 or $200. And so that shift would go towards my debt. And then I also picked up a respite care job, which was basically the military families, if they have like medically fragile like kids, it'll give like respite care to the families. Like I basically was a babysitter while the parent was there. And to this day, that family is still like one of my very good friends. But that money all went to my student loans as well. So it's like about $1,000 a month. So I wasn't really working much extra, but I had about probably $2,000 extra dollars at least just from those 2 things a month to put towards my debt. And that was without like cutting anything back or like, eating beans. Like I was just like, okay, I can still do this without making myself miserable. And that's kind of where the saving without sacrifice slogan came from, was that you are able to save and pay off debt without sacrificing the things that you love. And it's something that I still stand by. And it's what kind of pulled me out of like that Dave Ramsey period, and what I'll have a lot of clients that'll come to me and be like, I've done Dave Ramsey. It wasn't sustainable for me. And like, I really like your perspective. And so I really combine the mindset and the habits portion in addition to like the like values. And so that's kind of where my program started and like the things I wanted to teach. And that's all because of what I did in order to pay off that $46,000. And I did it in about 18 months. I also got engaged during that time. And then I saved the $10,000 while I was paying down the debt because I was able to like get those jobs that paid extra money.
So I find it interesting how very successful entrepreneurs, and you even said it, like you feel like you paid off the $15,000 of credit card debt maybe the wrong way. But every, like, what I'm getting back to is like these entrepreneurs, they're like, oh, I hustled and I didn't see my family for 10 years and I regret it. But I see a pattern, like everybody does that and then they all regret it. So what type of advice do you tell people like when they're first starting? Like how do you initially start something that you're not going to look back and regret later?
So I think you have to figure out like what your priorities are, because I wasn't really sure what my priorities were at the time. And when I was paying off the debt the first time, the credit card debt, my main priority was paying off the debt. So I let a lot of things like slip. I didn't see friends. And that's, while it wasn't a really long period of time and it showed me what I didn't want to do and what my priorities actually were, I think just assessing your priorities first before you do that is really important, because once you do that, then you can fit a plan or, create a business or whatever you want to do around those priorities.
Yeah. And I think also realizing that there's going to be stressful times and there's going to be busy times. And sometimes you just have to be okay with it for being a really busy season of your life. I know a lot of these, I'll refer to the same people, like they regret the busyness in their life, but at the same time, it set up the rest of their future. So at some point there was going to be busy times and you just have to be okay with it depending on what your goals are. And to your point, like just make sure you know what you want and set your goals appropriately.
Yeah. So the debt that you paid off, that $46,000, you said it was mostly credit card debt. And was that just credit card debt and student loans, or?
So the 46 was wrong. No, it was not.
You bet.
So the 15,000 I actually don't even post about because I did it the wrong way. And I will talk about it sometimes. But the 18 months was $46,000 of just student loan debt. So I do always say that it was much easier for me to pay that debt down because I didn't have any other debt. I didn't have credit card debt that was like killing me while I was trying to pay my student loans. I paid the credit cards off first, and then I went with the student loans, and they were all consolidated anyways. So it was very easy. I just like kept making payments to it. And I was looking back at how much interest I paid in that 18 months. And it was like nothing because I made so many payments to it. So I was like shocked. I was like, the year before when I was just making minimum payments, I probably paid like twice as much in interest. But when I was paying all it down, I was like not paying any interest, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think, and that's again, like, there's a lot of reoccurring themes as we go through this with different people, but it's like that lower interest rate debt that you're paying down. It's like, for some people is that it's the right move, and for others it's not. I think there's like a peace of mind component to it, and it's like if that's big for you, then it's just like, even if it might not be the best like financial move for you to pay that debt off, if it's just going to give you that peace of mind, like that alone has so much value to it.
Definitely. And that's kind of how I do debt payoff plans too. So a lot of people will just tell you like debt snowball or debt avalanche, which I'll explain that really quick because some people might not want to know what that is. The debt snowball is lowest payment to biggest payment, and there's no regards to the interest rate. And then the avalanche is the highest interest to the lowest interest, and you pay that down. So I look at that, but then I also look at your feelings towards the debt. So if something is really causing you a lot of anxiety, then I would say you should probably pay that down as well, because even though it doesn't make sense financially, if that's causing you so much anxiety that you can't like think about anything else or move forward, then you should probably pay that down. But it may not make the most financial sense to other people, but if that's going to help you, then definitely. And I think looking back too, and I don't know if you guys were going to eventually ask this, but I may not have paid down. Like, it was great that I paid my student loans off. It felt really good. Was it the like smartest financial decision? Probably not, because it wasn't super high interest, and I probably could have applied now that the public service loan forgiveness is better. I was a very much anti-public service loan forgiveness years ago because it was just literally can I say shit show? It was a shit show. It was not like, nobody was getting approved. It was like 0.05%. Like, I remember going on a rant about it because I was like, no one gets approved. It's just stupid. And so now I feel like there's much better options for people, that maybe paying your student loans isn't the best idea because you can get them forgiven. And so I think there's just so many things you have to factor in when it comes to your finances, that there's not a one size fits all for everyone.
So I love it when somebody asks you a question and then you're like, well, it depends, because it always depends. So it sounds like you're very much that type of person. Like you'll look at somebody's financial situation, and then of course it always depends. But do you have do you have your favorite way? What is your favorite way to tell people?
I would say
it depends.
No. If you are wanting to get set up like well financially, I think the first thing that you need to do is pay off high interest debt. I think that's because the payments are high. You're paying unnecessary extra amounts on very like purchases you've already made. So I think credit cards are definitely something that you should probably pay off in any way that you think is appropriate. Like, probably the highest interest first would be just so you can save money. So I think getting rid of credit card debt is huge, especially if it has interest. If it's 0%, just pay it down. Or do like, if it's high interest, do a balance transfer if that's feels right to you. But definitely high interest debt. And then I would look and I would save first to be there's so many people that don't even have $500 saved in their account. And so I think the other big thing that I disagreed with Dave Ramsey is the $1,000, because $1,000 isn't going to get you anything. It's not going to really help you very much in a time of, I just even think back, I had surgery in July and my surgery was $2,000 and I had to take off 4 weeks of work and only got paid for 2. So even from that, I would have had to save at least, let's just say $5,000. And those are the things that you want to save for, because you never know what's going to happen. I didn't think I was going to have shoulder surgery. Like, it wasn't planned. And so I think the first thing would just be to save. And so I like saving and creating it as a habit. So saving a percentage of your income until you hit at least 3 to 6 months of expenses in a savings account, preferably a high interest savings account, because it's free money. And then I would pay down the high interest debt. And then from there, it just depends on what your goals are. So like, is it to buy a house? Is it to, pay down your student loans? Is it to, and I think a Roth IRA is also something that's invaluable as well. Anyone who's eligible should at least have that. And then if not, should have a backdoor. So
while we're on the topic of student loans, I think we've mentioned on here before, but I cashed out my 401k and paid off student loans with that. Great idea. I wouldn't recommend, no. Right? You recommend that to everybody? No, I'm just kidding. But there was a little bit of peace of mind that went into that decision. Would I do it again? Absolutely not. Terrible idea. But I have the peace of mind now knowing that it's completely gone. But then you mentioned this forgiveness program, which I did not know about. Can you talk about that? What is that? And what am I missing out on?
The public service loan forgiveness. So that's if you have federal student loans.
Yeah.
You have to work. So these are, I could have a whole episode on the public service loan forgiveness. You have to work for an eligible nonprofit for 10 years. So you have to make, I think it's 120 payments. The payments during COVID counted. So if you weren't paying anything, they counted. There's like a waiver that you can apply for now. It's on the website, and it was like, so that all the payments counted and they readjusted it and everything. But basically, the federal government will forgive, and there's some issues with it, and we can talk about that in a second, but they will forgive all of your, like the rest of your student loans after the 10 years, but you have to work full time.
I do remember that like being kind of tossed out into the atmosphere when I was graduating. And I guess in my mind at the time, I was like, 10 years is a long time. I think I can pay them off before that. I don't know if I really trust the government to do what they say they're going to do. So yeah, there's a lot of considerations that go into that. And plus, like typically you don't make as much money when you're working in these government type sectors, right?
So there's some hospitals that are nonprofit that are not really nonprofit. Okay. They're for they just are coded as nonprofit. So it just has to be ineligible. So it really just depends on the hospital. But when you were probably looking into it, it was probably around the same time that I was like, it's $46,000. By the time that I pay the 10 years, I'll have paid $46,000. So why would I just wait and like get the rest of the interest? So to me, it made more sense for me to just pay them down. I also wanted the freedom to quit working whenever I wanted to, which is why I started my business. And I was working part-time, which I wouldn't have been eligible. So you have to work full-time and you have to work for 10 years. I don't know how it works with like maternity leave and stuff like that. And I wanted kids. And so I was like, why would I pay all this money that's not going to go towards anything and then gamble at the chance that I may or may not get these loans forgiven? So I think it's good for some people. The other big one that people do, which kind of go with what you were saying, with you would be paid a lot less, is the HRSA, which is, but basically you have to work for like it's like in a rural area, and they'll forgive or they'll give you a stipend to pay back your loans. But it's taxed, and you have to stay with them for like 2 or 3 years, I think. And I mean, it's an option for some people, but it just depends. So, I mean, there's just so many ways. I think personal finance is there's just so many ways to do the same thing, or so many ways to do different things, that I think so many people get caught up in like one perfect way to do something when there's like a million ways that you can go about the same thing.
I think that thing of like having to stay in one place, because that was kind of my problem. I think I was working for, it was an Adventist health hospital, which had that nonprofit designation. So it counted, but I was like, there's no way I'm staying here full time for 10 years. And so that kind of similar to that, it was like, I was like, well, whatever, like I'll just go travel and then I can pay stuff down by making more money. So yeah, it's not for everyone, but for the people it's working out for, I mean, I think it's, I don't know. I have kind of mixed feelings on it, because I've heard different perspectives, as like some people are like, well, why should, the government use tax dollars to pay off student loans? Like that was your choice. It's an investment. And like, as somebody like with student loans, I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's okay.
It's so okay with
pay
me.
them off.
Yeah,
but then as soon as they're paid off, I'm gonna be like, man, this is ridiculous that the government is using my tax dollars. No, I mean, but I look at it as an investment. I'm like, you know what? I invested that in my education, and I was able to get to where I am today because of it. So,
well, I think just changing your mindset too around debt. So as much as like other people use good debt and bad debt, I don't like those terms, because I feel like a lot of people have negative mindsets towards debt anyways. And yes, credit card debt is not the smartest thing. It's something I really like. There's so much guilt and shame around money anyways. So I want to teach people to take that away. And so something that you just said, Colin, was that you thought your student loans were an investment. So like, what did that debt allow you to do? It allowed you to go to school and be a travel nurse and make a bunch of money. So I like people to take that reframe before they even start with, what plan should I have?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And we use debt because we buy rental properties and we use debt for the properties. Yeah, it's debt, but it's also allowing us to own this $200,000 asset that's going to be paid off at some point, and we're not even paying it off. The people that are renting it from us are paying it off.
Yeah.
Good debt. It's good debt.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, and then my debt led me to nursing, which led me to my wife, which is Josh's sister,
which led us
together.
Him to me, so. which is what the grand scheme of things was.
Yeah,
debt brought me to Colin,
and it's keeping us together. Yeah. So you got your coaching that you're doing. Are you still pretty heavily involved with that?
So when I got divorced, I had to take a step back just because, like I just said, finances are so tied to emotions and trauma. I actually got my money trauma certification from Trauma of Money last year, I think. So it kind of allowed me to be more trauma informed because I love mindset. Like money mindset is my jam. I think that it is so important, along with like actually knowing personal finance education. And so when I'm coaching, it's like I'm a therapist for people, especially doing one-on-one. And so, because I do like the mindset. And so I had to take a step back because I myself was going through things. So I took probably about a year off and I just restarted with, I think I have 3 or 4 one-on-ones. And then I do a lot of like one-off debt payoff and budgeting calls. So like I help people create budgets and I help people create like goals, financial goals. So I've been doing a lot of that. So yeah.
But it sounds like in the meantime, you've kind of paired that with a job within nursing that kind of allows you that time to be more involved with that. So how did you find your way into that?
So I never wanted to work full-time after I got divorced. So I was working part-time before I got divorced, and then I got divorced and I found this super cool job in the PICU where I only worked every other weekend. So every other Saturday and Sunday, and I got part-time benefits for only working 4 days a month. And then I would pick up shifts during the week for like quadruple bonus because it was during COVID. And then they kind of figured that out. And I wasn't allowed to do that anymore because I was working the system. But like I would travel all the time. I kind of just did whatever I wanted, which was fantastic, being like separated and being able to do that. And then I went and traveled and I worked full time and kind of decided I didn't really like traveling because I like where I live. I have friends here. I've built a life here. And so I didn't want to go anywhere else. So I decided I would do Pete's Cath Lab, but I was like, I don't really know if I want to work full time. Like 410s, that sounds horrible. But I ended up enjoying it. And then I had surgery and some stuff happened and just decided that it really wasn't for me. And I wanted better work-life balance. And so I just started looking for jobs. So I typed in, I think like hybrid and triage, and it took me to like a hybrid pediatric cardiology job that I thought I had wanted, but it was like 2 days at home and 3 days in the office. And I was like, maybe like that'd be kind of nice to be home 2 days a week. But I'm like, but I really want a remote job. Like I really want to be home all the time. I have 2 dogs. I'm like, I really want a better schedule. I want to have time to do my coaching again. Me and my mom were starting a podcast. And so I was like, let me just put it out there. And so I kept looking. And one day this one job popped up, which is the job I have now. And it was like ability to work like fully remote. And I'm like, ooh, that's what I want. And I applied. And like 2 hours later, the manager emailed me and she's like, we have your resume. Like, do you want to interview? And I'm like, yes. And so I shadowed. it seems like fantastic. I've been there for 2 weeks, but I also committed to teaching too, because of what I went through in like nursing school and bullying and everything. Like I kind of want to give back, and I do love teaching. And so I was like, well, I'll only take this job if you like allow me to teach as well. And so they're like, yeah, that's totally fine. So, I mean, everybody seems to love their job, which is great. I've never been at an actual like nursing job where people like love their job. So it's different. So I'm excited.
Is it fully remote?
Yeah. So there's like a call center I'll train at for like a month or 2 months, and then I can be fully remote. So.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, so we've interviewed a bunch of nurses, and we've only come across one that was just in love with her job. She loved it. There's a unicorn. She's working in California.
Probably that's why.
This is why out there close to college. Yeah. So debt consolidation. I know it sounds like you are, or you were saying that it's very predatory. So what is that? I guess, what does that look like? What are they trying to offer? And like,
so I think from like what I can gather is that you apply for a debt consolidation loan, and a lot of the stuff they're talking about is like student loans, and that is something I would not consolidate, especially if you are wanting to do something like the public service loan forgiveness or want a small payment, or I mean, federal student loans are not high interest. And so getting a private loan is just, to me, doesn't make sense. And so I'm not quite sure what they're doing or why they're marketing that way. But that's what I can gather, is that they're a debt. And I have suggested some debt consolidation companies to some people, depending on their situation. If they have tons of credit card debt and just can't get out of it, but it hurts your credit as well. And so if you're wanting to buy a house, your credit is important. I know there's some financial people that will say it's not, but it really is. It's how you buy anything in our society, unfortunately.
So when I finished school, federal student loans were like 6.5%, 7%. I think I had one that was 7.5%. And today that doesn't seem like high interest. But when I graduated, I consolidated with one of these companies. I don't remember which one. And I got like 3%. So I guess today they're not high interest loans, but back when I finished, they kind of were. And it at the time, it seemed like it made sense to consolidate. Not with this company.
Well, and I think, again, just like it depends.
Yeah, great. Just kidding.
Look, interest rates are higher now. And if you're wanting those benefits of federal student loans and have federal, like if you have private student loans, that's another story. They're usually higher interest. They don't come with the benefits of being able to apply for public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment, but federal student loans do. And so if you are wanting those perks, then I always suggest not to refinance unless you're really wanting to aggressively pay down your loans and don't want to take advantage of those programs, and the interest rates are going to be lower, which I don't see them being lower right now.
Yeah. Well, and when I refinanced it eliminated all the other options that I had. My only option would be to pay them off as fast as I could. But to your point, like if you leave them in federal, they're not that much higher interest, and then you keep all of these other options open.
It just goes back to like education on this kind of stuff. Like I didn't know anything about student loan debt and just debt in general going into this. And part of that was my family I grew up in. Like, they were very much like, without even knowing who Dave Ramsey was, like they were like, my dad is like cash only and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just think like just in general, there's not that education on, hey, like formulate some sort of plan. If you plan on going and working at this particular hospital for 10 years or for indefinitely, like keep your federal student debt. So that's, and that's again, part of something here. It's like trying to just raise awareness on like all fronts about everything. Cause it's like, it could be like student loan debt, credit card debt. It's just personally the two of us. And that was kind of our motivation in starting something like this. We just had very little financial education on a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world today and building credit even. Mm-hmm. So
we see more people talking about it now. It sounds like you got started before it was popular. We're going to hop on the bandwagon now. But yeah, a lot of this stuff, or none of this stuff, we were introduced to it early on. It was after we had learned these lessons on our own. If you can learn from somebody else,
and what's super interesting is I bought my first, well, it was technically my second house. Me and my ex-husband bought a house together. So I bought a house on my own, which I did all of the research on my own. I, did everything by myself. And I did that in March of last year. And I made a post about like how much it actually costs to buy a house. And it like went viral on TikTok. And I just really like broke it down to like everything, that goes into buying a house. And so many people were like, I didn't even know that's what goes into buying a house. And so many people just think you need a down payment and then you are going to pay a monthly payment every month. And that's not what goes in. And then it was funny because I like posted this and then like a couple weeks later, a bunch of realtors started posting like how much a $400,000 house actually costs. And I'm like, you guys all just freaking copied me, like whatever. But it was so funny because no one had posted about that. So it was like, how did no one think to like educate people on like what it actually costs to buy a house? Because like I put my closing costs in there. I put I needed new ductwork, so I like put that in there. What else? Basically just broke it down like in layman's terms. So it's just like, why have so many people been gatekeeping this information that like this is how much it costs to actually buy a house? Or like, so it's just really interesting that we still are just so behind on any type of education on finances, which just sucks because I feel like it needs to be in everyone's hands.
Yeah.
So the first house I bought was back in 2018. And to your point, there was so many extra costs that I was completely unaware of. Like simple stuff like blinds. Like our house is a new build, so it didn't have blinds. And then after ordering blinds, I'm like, wow, there's $2,000 I didn't know was going to be used for blinds only. And then we had grass. We got all this other stupid stuff that we had to put in.
Yeah, grass is so
think
dumb.
about that a little bit, guys. Grass. I'm half Mexican, so grass is extremely important.
My whole yard is weeds. I have half an acre and it's just all weeds. So whatever.
Oh man, I'm like tensing up just thinking about that.
I just want the video on the cost of buying a free phone from like T-Mobile or something, or Verizon. It's like you go in there like, come in, sign up, and it's a free phone, and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, that'll be $150. You're like, wait, what? It's like taxes, activation fee, this, and this. Don't even buy a case or the headphones. Like it's all crazy now.
Speaking of phones, there's actually a class action lawsuit that is going on with Verizon for hidden fees. So always apply to class action. Yep. And I got one for Invisalign. I got Invisalign last year. And so I got like a message that's like, there's a class action lawsuit for Invisalign. So always apply to those. Yeah.
Jump on free $100. Yeah. Free $100, but they probably could charge you for that. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So we're going to move on to our final segment. We call the final five, same 5 questions that we ask everybody. And the first one is, I'm just going to read it this time because I messed up last time. What is a top financial resource that you found for nurses? Whether it's a book, podcast, what resource?
I'm kind of partial. So I have a budget planner or my course, either one. But if you don't want to support me, then The Latte Factor is one of my favorite books by David Bach. It's something I gave to like all my mentees when I first started. It breaks down finances in like the most basic way and in a way that a lot of people can understand. And so I just really love that book. So it's The Latte Factor by David Bach.
What is your stuff? Yeah. Your course, your whatever, plug your stuff.
My course is 3 Phases to Financial Freedom. And then I also have a money mindset course called Money Magnet Accelerator. And those are on my page. And then, so the money course is just like basically all the basics that you could want in a course. So it's like goes over like debt payoff, it goes over budgeting, it goes over saving, it goes over how to create a side hustle, it goes over financial, like how to create good financial habits, it goes over money mindset. So it's basically everything you could want in a course. And then I have a budget planner, and then I also have a financial checkup, which it'll tell you like how you're doing, and then also like what the next steps would be. So like, would it be to like hire a coach? Would it be to, start investing? Would like, so it just kind of like pinpoints you to where you should go from like where you're at. So it gives you like a good gauge.
Do people find that do you have a website, or is it on your Instagram, or both?
So both. I have link tree so that it's all in there. And then my website's www.savingwithoutsacrifice.com.
Nice. Well, cool. So number 2, what advice would you give yourself as a new grad?
Save my money. Like save a percentage every paycheck and then open whatever investment account, like retirement account the hospital offers, and just start, even if it's little.
Number 3 is, what is your big goal for the next 12 months? And what does 2024 look like for you?
I feel like last year that was a better question for me because it was to buy a house and I did that. This year, let's see. I guess just to continue investing and then hopefully put my house up for rent at some point, which maybe might not be this year. But the house that I bought, I eventually want to rent it out. So, but I would have to move on. So we'll see. So hopefully that.
So the 4th question is, if you were to tell people to do one thing right now, what would you tell them to do?
Do an audit of your finances, like for the last 3 months. So know where your money has been going.
That's not something that's come up in this section, but I think it's so important because it's like just identifying where you're at is huge. Because
I think the problem is a lot of us just like want to start a budget or like want to do the perfect thing when it comes to your finances, or like you're so stuck. And the best thing that you can do is just create awareness of where you're at financially. So whether that's, going back and seeing what you've been spending on and, what debt that you have, just like really just like writing it out. But I think so many people are so scared and so intimidated, or just like don't want to even like look at that. And they want to like be, like in a book. I can't think of the word. I'm tongue tied. They want to avoid their financial situation because it might be easier. So just creating that awareness is huge.
All right. Our last question, number 5, is, what's the biggest financial mistake that you've made and how can you avoid it in the future? Or how can we avoid it?
I would say not investing sooner. So I waited. So I wasn't really great, obviously, at the beginning. And then I wasn't really investing any money into a Roth or anything else. I didn't open a Roth until I was 29. And so I think just even if you open it and create that habit of like putting a little bit of money away, for me, it's all about habits. So if you start that habit, you're going to continue it. And as like you hit your other financial goals, you can always increase it. And that money is going to grow anyways. So I think just like starting investing as soon as you can, because time is the most precious resource when it comes to investing.
Just in general too. That's what everybody says. Like it's your only fixed asset. So it's like, you got to take care of that.
Yep.
This is, I think you kind of already mentioned some of your, places where people can reach out, but where, like Instagram, what's the best place for people to find you?
So I am most active on Instagram and TikTok, and my handle is @the_debt-free nurse.
All right. And that might change soon. So should we?
No, leave it for now, because I'll change my business first, and then if I change my business, then I may stay the debt-free nurse. Even if I don't, like if I change my business name might change. But then I don't know. We'll see.
Trademark pending.
Yes, hopefully.
And your website was
savingwithoutsacrifice.com.
Saving without sacrifice. All right.
All right, everybody, go check out her stuff. Thanks again for coming on. This was a great episode.
Yeah, this is fun. Thank you.
Thank you.